I'm coming at you from Winnipeg Beach, Manitoba right now. So hopefully the connection stays stable. I'm glad we have people from all over the place. I'm going to save my drink for after this. So you can drink during it, but I'll have mine for after. I'm sure all of you know, but we're talking about immune resilience and wellness in the age of Corona. And it's my pleasure to introduce our guest for the evening, Sara-Chana Silverstein. She's a board-certified lactation consultant, master herbalist, classical homeopath, keynote speaker, and mother of 7 children. She is regularly on TV news shows across the U.S. discussing how people can integrate alternative with conventional medicines. She's also a consultant to many pediatricians, surgeons, obstetricians, midwives, and doctors, and is currently guest lecturing to residents on breastfeeding at New York medical schools. So thank you so much for being here. Before we kick off her presentation, I'll just give you a little, to talk to you a bit about how the night is going to go. So Sara-Chana is going to give a presentation for a bit, and then there will be an opportunity for questions. So make sure you have your questions ready. The way they work on Zoom is you put your questions into the chat box, and I'm going to get some questions sent to me directly that I'll be able to ask Sara-Chana. So you'll keep yourselves on mute for this, and I'll be asking the questions, but please feel free to add whatever you want, what questions you have in the chat box. And I'll keep track of time, and Sara-Chana has a presentation, so she'll share her screen, and we'll wrap this up at about 9. So take it away, Sara-Chana.
Thank you so much, Rabbi and Rebbitzin Altein and Bryan, and thank you all for joining in. I know it's hard to stop your routine of staying home in quarantine, but I'm glad that you could join us. I don't see my PowerPoint, guys. Do we have it up there? Do you guys see it?
Yeah, sorry, I'm just getting it right now.
Oh, no problem. So while we're waiting for the PowerPoint, I want to let you know that I'm very much in my practice into integrating alternative with conventional medicine. Alternative or herbal medicine doesn't have all the answers. Western medicine does not have all the answers. So the best type of healthcare is when you integrate both. I tell my clients all the time, if God forbid you break a leg, you don't run to your homeopath, you go get an x-ray, you find out what it is, you get a cast on your leg. But then if you take herbal medicine, it will help the bones knit together. If you get a toothache and need a root canal, run to your dentist, he's the guy to go to. But you can take some herbs to prevent infection. So it's really all about integration. We are going to talk a bit about COVID-19. I am not a COVID-19 specialist, nor is anybody really in the world today. It is a new virus. We do know about coronaviruses, and we know the way viruses work in our system. It's something that herbalists and allopathic practitioners study all the time. I myself am a survivor of COVID-19. It was quite a nasty virus. I did have it for 4 weeks. I think my biggest problem was that I worked very hard the first 2 weeks that I had it. It was between Purim when I got it. Passover was right around the corner. I have 7 children plus guests, so I worked too hard, and I think that's what made it take a month to go away in my system. But I did help hundreds of people with COVID-19. Thank God, either it's a coincidence or a miracle, but none of the clients that worked with me and their doctors ended up in the hospital. After I recovered from COVID-19, because I am a lactation consultant, this is not a talk on breastfeeding, but I had over 550 women that tested positive for COVID-19 and their babies. So from my experience and the experience of the first responders in the New York area, we did not get reinfected. So it appears, and I don't know how long that immunity lasts, but I mean, if anybody was going to re-get it, it would have been me, because I had a lot of women in my office. They literally tested positive in the hospital, came to me to work on the breastfeeding, and went home. So that's a little bit of the good news. People that have diabetes, it is a little bit of a concern. So keeping your blood sugar levels stable are very important. People with high blood pressure, it is a concern. Make sure you're on your medicine and keeping them stable. And we get a little bit concerned about blood clotting. So if you're on blood thinning medicine, stay on those. So that's my experience with COVID-19. Again, I'm not an expert, but what I am an expert on is building the immune system with herbs and other things that we have available. Before we go to our first slide, I want to say that it says in Tehillim Psalms that Hashem, God, gave grass for the cattle and herbs for the service of man. And the word there is service. God also tells us that he put the refuah, the healing in the world before the illness. And on the days of creation, God created plants and trees before man. So we know that the plants and trees have to be here to help us. And in the Beis HaMikdash, our holy temple, that's the Western Wall where everybody runs to in Israel to pray, we had a mizbeach, or an altar, specifically for burning plants and essential oils. So basically, you should know that herbs and aromatherapy is not just for hip and funky people that live in downtown Manhattan or in LA, which I spend my summers in. It's for all of us. It's for all Jewish people. When we went to the land of Israel, it was a barren desert. And we as Jews went in there, we worked the lands, we made farms out of sand, we created plants and trees like nowhere else in the Middle East. So our nature as Jewish people is to get out there, get our hands dirty, dig inside the soil. It's just who we are. Basically, we're like great businessmen and farmers, and that's an important thing to know. Next slide. Okay, so I made this PowerPoint way before we were wearing masks. This PowerPoint has been tweaked, but when I used to teach about colds and flus even 10 years ago, I wanted to show you these photos because, yes, it's true. When you sneeze or cough, look at everything that it expectorates into the world. So it is a concern. When you put your hand in front of your mouth and you cough, you should wash your hands. And the funny thing is my kids, my 5 boys and 7 girls said, "Ma, really now people are learning to wash their hands? Like, we were raised washing our hands, like really?" So this is what they're hoping to avoid by our mask wearing. Next slide. So I just want to let you know that the studies show that a cough or sneeze can go 3 feet and sometimes 5 feet. And that's what we're trying to avoid with our masks. Next slide. Now, I also put up this slide, I want you to know, way before we were wearing masks. And my caption used to be, "Thank God in America and Canada, we don't have to wear masks." So it's very humorous for me to see it. Can it stop the spread of infection? I don't think that we know. There was a video that went through Instagram where they actually had a candle and someone threw their mask, blew out the candle, but it's certainly a good trial. I write here that our real goal is that we have a strong immune system. This way, you can go to the next slide. That's perfect with the bubble. We don't live in a bubble, except this little boy's having a blast in the bubble. So the question has always been, as an herbalist, everywhere you go, every kid in a classroom is exposed to strep throat. The question is, who gets it and who doesn't? And way before we were wearing masks, whenever you were on an airplane, there was someone that had a cold, someone that had a flu, and the question was who got it and who didn't. So our goal is to make our immune system function at its highest peak so we can be exposed to viruses and flus and colds, let our body be sick for about 24 to 48 hours, and then kick it. Next slide, please. So superfoods are all the rage. Everyone says superfoods. So here's some of the superfoods that I like that's easy to integrate, not very expensive. You don't have to go out there and go to Whole Foods and spend $50 on a product. So oatmeal is inexpensive. You can buy a big bag of it for like $5. It's got a lot of B vitamins in it. It actually supports the immune system with its B vitamins. Maple syrup instead of honey has a lot of calcium in it, and that's delicious. We've got dates. Dates is one of the fruits of Eretz Yisrael, of Israel, and it's got a lot of anti-inflammatory properties. Blackstrap molasses, for people that don't have money, that's your best multivitamin out there. Black cherry concentrate, berries, olive oil, fish oil, spinach, honey, soups, and smoothies. So the more you can have smoothies, because you can throw in spinach and blueberries and strawberries and some almond milk, and it's a great, powerful food, especially for those of us that are quarantined, not getting the exercise that we need. And soups are always great. It is true, chicken soup does have the ability to stimulate your immune system. It really does. So I say when you're making your chicken soup, throw in broccoli, throw in cauliflower, throw in different kinds of butternut squash, acorn squash, get as many colors as you can, and you've got some medicine right there. Next slide. So rebounding is a very interesting thing. I wrote a book called Moodtopia. It's all about why God put moodiness in the world, and I'm writing the book now, Moodtopia for Kids, and I talk about rebounding. Rebounding is an incredible way to stimulate your lymphatic system from moving viruses. So even if you don't have a big, huge trampoline in your backyard, you can, for like $50, buy a trampoline that fits under your bed. And rebounding allows the lymphs to get rid of the viruses and bacteria. When we get sick, we breathe it in our nose. Then we've got our tonsils that are our first filters. And what's very interesting is they are finding, there was one study I found that people that got their tonsils removed struggled more with COVID-19 than those that didn't. And I had my tonsils removed. Maybe that's why I had it for so long. In your nose, your tonsils will then see what the virus or bacteria is. Then it goes through our neck, through our lymphatic system. So jumping up and down can really help. I guess if you don't have a trampoline, you can jump on your bed. I mean, think about how much kids love jumping on the bed, right? It is the highlight of their lives. And you can't find a kid jumping on their bed in a bad mood, right? Whenever a kid is jumping on their bed, they've got the biggest smile in the world. So if you feel stuck emotionally or feel like you're getting sick, go up on your bed and start jumping. Okay, next slide. So this is an interesting study. The Lubavitcher Rebbe spoke about random acts of kindness. And I had just moved from LA to New York. And in LA, people are nicer. And I moved to New York and everyone was like so mean, right? And then the Rebbe spoke about random acts of kindness. And I was like, yeah, really? That's going to change the world? So I'm a researcher. And what did I find? That people that do random acts of kindness in clinical studies live longer. And when you do a random act of kindness, you actually lower your cortisol, which is your stress hormone, and it lowers your blood pressure. And by the way, it's super free and easy to do. So if you wake up in the morning and you get a flat tire and you get it fixed and you go and you get a parking ticket, right? You're not having a good day. And then you go to the dry cleaners and they lost your suit or your favorite dress. And then you go home and cook dinner and it burns, right? Like bad day. We all have bad days. The best way to heal your soul and your blood pressure is to do random acts of kindness. So try to take on doing a random act of kindness a day because it also builds your immune system. Next slide. So herbs are all the rage, and I'm going to read this slide, even though you all can read. Herbal medicine has a written history more than 5,000 years old. 75% of the world's population still rely primarily on traditional healing practices, most of which is herbal medicine. Next slide. WHO, which is the World Health Organization, which I know is a little controversial these days. We don't have time to get into that. But their research showed that the global market for traditional herbal remedies is thought to be around $83 billion a year. And herbal use in the United States and Canada and the Western world is on the rise. Next slide. So this is what an herbalist office looks like. I live in New York, so my office is about 1/8 of this size. But I just wanted to show you that when we use herbal medicine with the same plant, the root acts differently than the seeds act differently than the leaves, and the leaves act differently than the flowers. So when I was working with my herbal teacher, she told me she'd rather someone know 3 plants and how to make 20 medications than knowing 300 herbs and only 1 action. Meaning, dandelion, everybody knows about dandelion. Well, dandelion root can help with any liver congestion. It can help with any skin issues. The seeds help with lymphatic drainage. The leaves of just the dandelion, I'm talking about that pest in your garden, helps reduce inflammation and water retention. And the flowers, when you make it into an oil, can actually get rid of skin tags. You know those little skin tags you have that you don't want? If you rub dandelion oil on them for about a month or 2, they'll just fall right off. So plants are amazing. Next slide. So herbs come in different forms. You can get them in pill form, you can get them in tea form, and you can get them in tincture form, which I'm going to talk about. Now, no one's going to walk out of here being a master herbalist like me. I mean, I've studied for, oh my gosh, way too long. But I want to introduce you to it because it's called people's medicine, and plants are our gift from God, meaning no matter what happens to the weather, we have a cold winter, a warm winter, an in-between winter, the same plants grow in New York and LA, no matter what happens to the weather patterns. And they're here for our use. And I would like to throw out to everybody, if you could look up on the internet 3 medicinal plants that grow in your neighborhood naturally, it will blow your mind to see them. You'll walk down the street and go, oh my gosh, that's ginkgo. I didn't know that was edible. Or you're going to find a plant called plantain. So all these plants are growing around you. I want to tell you, I was in Midtown Manhattan, and I'm not a hippie, right? You go to herbal classes, everybody's a hippie, and I've got like my nails done, my nail polish on, sunglasses on the top of my head, and I go into Midtown Manhattan, and the herbalist said, if you want to heal a person, see what grows around their house. And I went over to her in my high heels and said, have you been to Brooklyn? Do you know what grows in Brooklyn? Well, we've got concrete, we've got cars, we've got fire escapes, and there's dog poop. So which one of those am I healing my clients with? She handed me a Peterson guide. She said, open your eyes and walk a block. So I grabbed my poor husband with me, and I've got this book, and I found 10 medicinal plants growing in 1 block of Brooklyn. Unbelievable. Okay, so it's here for us. We just need to know how to use it. Next slide. So you can drink tea, herbs in tea form. If you take a tea bag and put it in hot water, it's considered flavoring the tea, the water. It's not really medicinal. So I wanted to show you what I bought. I think it was 10 bucks on Amazon. This is a little diffuser. Look at how brilliant this is. You can unscrew the top, and I don't have stock in this company. It's a little filter. You put it in here, you fill it with herbs, you screw on the top, you add a little honey, you put hot boiling water over it, and this is your tea for the day to build your immune system. The whole process will take me about, I don't know, 5 minutes on the high end. People all over the world do tea, except for people in Canada and America. Basically, in England, there's tea time. They're good to have a pot of tea, right? So funny, because I was watching this show called Midwives. I don't know if any of you have seen it, from BBC. And whenever there's a crisis, there is a midwife that says, oh dear, we've got to get a pot of tea. And I'm always like, well, don't you think you should call 911? Like, really? Like, anytime someone had an issue, they gave them tea. It's not part of our culture. Think about Japanese tea ceremonies. These Japanese women spend 2 years learning how warm the tea should be, what kind of herb is in there, how to present the tea. So maybe we can incorporate some tea time into our lives. I mean, New York is a Starbucks place. It's all about coffee, but maybe we can integrate some tea. Next slide, please. So I use herbs in what is called tincture form, because I basically work with neurotic, type A personality, Jewish folk who are always on the run, and they don't really sit down and drink tea. So tincture is when you take an herb like this, pour grain alcohol over it, and you get a medicine like this. Why do I use it in tincture form? Because it takes you 20 seconds to take it, as opposed to 5 minutes of making a tea. You take a shot glass like this, put in your herbs, take a little grape juice, make a l'chaim, and drink it like a shot of vodka. Next slide. So herbs are really easy to make. Anybody here can learn how to make an herbal tincture. You just haven't been exposed to it. Next slide. You just take an herb. This is elderberry, by the way. You pour grain alcohol over it. You let it steep for 6 weeks. You strain it, and you've got herbal medicine. Next slide. These are just companies that I like. I have no stock in their companies, but Herb Farm, Wish Garden, and Herbalist and Alchemist are the herbs that I recommend. Next slide. So all of you should be asking me, why aren't there double-blind clinical studies on herbs? Like, really, Sara-Chana? If this is so miraculous, like, what's going on? So here's the problem. You can't patent an herb. You can patent part of an herb, but you can't patent an herb. So financially, it's a bit of a lose-lose financial endeavor for a lot of major companies. Now, has anybody heard of the herb glucophage? Glucophage is for diabetes. Metformin is the other name. It's made from an herb called goat's rue. And they took the component out of goat's rue that can help regulate blood sugar levels. Anybody ever heard of aspirin? Aspirin was originally made from an herb called white willow bark. Now let's talk about aspirin for a moment. Aspirin was a miraculous drug. You had a toothache before aspirin, there was nothing to take for pain. You had a splitting headache, there was nothing to take for pain. So Native Americans were using white willow bark, and the chemists took the herb white willow bark, isolated salicylic acid, and said, this is what's helping with pain, and they were correct. But here's the problem. Most Americans, and probably Canadians that are slightly over 42, have been told to take a baby aspirin every day because it thins the blood. But long-term use of aspirin causes tinnitus or ringing in the ears. And there's more tinnitus clinics opening up all over the western part because people are getting tinnitus. Because when you take a pill and isolate it, you're missing all the hundreds of components that Hashem, God, puts into the plant that we know nothing about. We still don't know what it's all about. But if you do white willow bark, you'll also thin your blood and you will not get all the side effects. Now, what's very interesting is after World War II, the German E-Commission did a lot of research on herbs, and also the NIH has done a lot of research on herbs. And I want to tell you one very interesting thing. About 8 years ago, there was a study done on echinacea. Maybe you remember it. It was all over CNN, Fox News, all over every station. And it said, echinacea in a double-blind study did not shorten the duration of a cold or flu, and it did not stop the symptoms, and basically it was useless. So I looked up this study at Harvard University, and it turned out that a pharmaceutical company rented out Harvard because Harvard has to support itself. And so it rents out its laboratories for research studies. They gave echinacea without giving the dosage to whether it was a man or a female or how much you weighed or how tall you were. And they also gave it in capsule form, which is not very effective for echinacea. And the worst part was, they said you could take Dimetap, you could take Benadryl, any medicines you want at the same time. So this clinical study was completely bogus. But why? Why did they do a bogus study? Because herbs are becoming so popular on the West that instead of doing clinical studies to prove them, people are spending money on clinical studies to disprove them. Next slide. So when I give a person herbs, I kind of mix it like a jazz band. Like saxophone is phenomenal, but your saxophone with your drums is a little more attractive, and put in a keyboard. So the same thing, we're going to be talking about herbs singly just to expose you to it. But really, when you work with an herbalist, you can have a headache, a stomachache, diarrhea, and a sore throat. So I'm going to give herbs for all those. Okay, next slide. So astragalus, which I have in front of me, and I don't have all the herbs in front of me, we don't have time. Astragalus has been used in Asia, China, Japan, and Korea for thousands of years. It helps build the immune system, and it's anti-inflammatory. You can actually take these pieces of bark and put them in your chicken soup and let it cook, and it will make your chicken soup have an even stronger immunity to it. Next slide. Echinacea does help decrease the time span of a cold or flu. It is an immunomodulator. It modulates the immune system. And this was a phenomenal herb during COVID-19. You see those beautiful purple flowers. Now that you've seen them, you're going to see them growing in your area. And we actually harvest the root in the fall. Next slide. Lemon balm is an herb that every single person on this Zoom, you can go to your, do you have Home Depot there? Any kind of store like that. It's like $1.29 for a lemon balm. You can grow it on a pot on your windowsill or on your porch. It's in the mint family. It's antiviral, and it really helps with aches and pains of flu. It's safe with almost every medication out there. For kids, you can make it into ice pops if kids have fevers. Before you fly on a plane, you can have a little bottle like this of lemon balm to help with anxiety when we go back to flying in planes. And lemon balm, you can just cut the leaves right off the plant and make it into a tea, and it's delicious. Next slide. Cleavers is very fascinating. I have to tell you this. I actually did a video on this for COL, which is Crown Heights Live, because cleavers helps with the lymphatic system. It helps take the virus through the body and excrete it through your urine or stool. It blew my mind. I've never seen more cleavers in the 30-some years that I've lived in Crown Heights grow like it did during COVID-19. This is a plant that you'll occasionally see growing in New York. It was on everybody's lawn, everybody's backyard. It was between the dividers on the highway. I was like so shocked. I mean, it's like God put the healing right there. Cleavers was an herb that was in every one of my clients' mixes. I mean, if God put COVID-19 into the world, He also gave us tools to handle it, and cleavers is one of them. Next slide. Fresh milky oats is a great herb. When horses race in a horse track, they need to like run fast and also stay calm at the same time, right? So trainers give horses oats because it calms the system down and gives you energy at the same time. So eating oatmeal is great, or drinking a cup of fresh milky oat tea. Next slide. Elderberry, we all know about elderberry here. I've got some elderberry here. It probably grows all over your neighborhood. It's very high in vitamin C. It's a delicious, yummy taste. I mean, for generations, people used to make elderberry wine. It was the hit of every community. And it's anti-inflammatory and reduces inflammation, and it tastes yummy. Elderberry syrup, I mean, you can pour it over your pancakes. You can make it into elderberry jam. It's yum. Next slide. Osha root was one of the other herbs that I found was very important during COVID-19. I have some Osha root here. Not a beautiful plant. Osha root opens up the lungs and allows more air to take in. So a lot of my clients that had COVID-19, whenever their chest got tight, they would take the Osha, and they felt that the Osha just opened up their lungs. It's interesting because the bears, after hibernating, bears will go and dig up this root and chew on the root. And it gives their lungs the ability, because they've been hibernating, they've been sleeping, they've been, in their REM state. And then they have to, be powerful and run. And OSHA opens up their lungs, and it does ours too. There was no OSHA available anywhere on the internet from about 2 weeks after COVID-19 came on. It was unbelievable how popular it was worldwide with this very nasty virus. Next slide, please. Yarrow is amazing. They actually put yarrow flowers in bouquets. It's a very popular herb to put in florists use it all the time. And it helps with thinning the blood and moving the blood through the body. And that's something we needed during COVID-19, was to keep that blood moving. It grows all over. One warning, it does look exactly like a poisonous plant called hemlock. You guys read any Shakespeare or any old literature? Like if you wanted to get rid of someone, you like poison them with hemlock. Don't tell anybody I told you that. So I wouldn't go out and pick yarrow unless you're with an herbalist like me, but you can get it in a tincture bottle and it helps beautifully. Next slide. Passion flower, I could never have a talk without passion flower. Look at that crazy flower. It looks like it's from outer space and alien. Passion flower helps you sleep, helps you have a deeper sleep. It grows all over Israel, by the way, and the passion fruit comes out of the passion flower. If you need help with going to sleep, you cannot take passion flower. If you want to be in bed by 1, you can't take it 5 minutes to 1 like I try to do all the time. You need to take a little passion flower with dinner, so you chill a little passion flower about 8, 9 o'clock, so you chill a little more, and then at 12 o'clock when you're going to bed. It's safe for children. It's safe with most medications on the market today. Next slide. Skullcap is one of my favorites. Like, I couldn't live without skullcap. So when it's not COVID-19 and we're not in lockdown and people aren't traveling, I travel all over the country and the world speaking about this exact topic. And skullcap is for nervous tension, nervous anxiety. I get a little nervous, type A personality. Skullcap is in the mint family. It helps with that nervous butterflies in the stomach, chest palpitations. Maybe you're going on a new job interview. Maybe you're going on a date. Maybe you're going on a date with your spouse you've been married to for 40 years, but you're nervous because you never get out. Let's say you're traveling on a plane and you're nervous about COVID-19. Skullcap is one of the best herbs to calm anxiety, and it really works. Next slide. Linden is another herb I just want you to hear. It's used all over France to help with digestion. So you go to France, you have a really fatty meal with all these gorgeous, yummy sauces and butter, and you get this fattening dessert, and you're like, oh my gosh, I really overate. They will come and bring you a linden tea. It calms the blood pressure, it's healing for the heart, and it's healing for the stomach. And we just in New York passed linden season. Maybe you haven't gotten to it yet because you're an hour behind us. Maybe you're like a week behind us. But linden flowers is one of the most beautiful scents in the world. If you're walking down the street with a linden tree, just stand under it and smell. It's stunning. Next slide. Rose, I know we're running out of time, but I gotta talk to you about roses. All rose petals are edible, except the ones that you get in your florist. No way, because they spray them with chemicals and dyes. But roses have been used for generations to help broken hearts. So when you have someone in the hospital, you bring them roses, because just the act of giving a rose actually produces happiness in a person. When you bring it inside, it helps bring joy to your heart. So if you have a broken heart, which we all do for so many reasons, rose is something that we need to take internally. Next slide. St. John's wort is very popular. We use it more for pain. It's used for depression. We use it for pain in your nerve pain, tooth pain. And this was an herb, I put it in here because It was really popular with herbalists across the world to help with COVID-19, I guess because of its calming effect, because I think the fear was a little more devastating for some people than even the virus itself. This is contraindicated with some medications, but I wouldn't want you to like walk away from this lecture and read an article and say, why didn't Sara-Chana talk about St. John's wort? So here it is. It's a gorgeous flower. Next slide. So that's our talk about herbs. I like herbs in tea or tincture form. I want to talk about colors for a moment. Colors are super important because they make us feel better. So you look in the mirror and you're wearing a black shirt and you're all depressed and you're in your house for too long, you're going to have this dark glow or lack of glow around your face. Whenever you put on a vibrant color, color vibrates energy and it actually makes people feel good. So if you're in a cold winter, and I know you guys have cold winters, get yourself a turquoise blue scarf. Get yourself a yellow scarf. So when you look in the mirror, you're like, oh, I don't look as exhausted as I feel. And if you're in a boring cubicle, you go back to work, how amazing is it to just have color paper of yellow over here and a little red or orange over there. So when we're home, think about bringing colors into your life. Next slide. Let's skip homeopathy. We don't have time for it. Let's go on. Next slide, I think, is on homeopathy also. Next slide, let's go on. Next lecture. I want to talk about aromatherapy for 1 minute, and we're going to go through it very quickly. I want to tell you a story. My daughter was hit by a car. She became a quadriplegic, and she lived in the hospital for almost 8 months, okay? I'm going to try not to cry. It was the worst experience I ever had in my life. And I want to tell you that when I was in the hospital, it smelled like death, and it smelled like blood, and it was horrible. And I had just written my book, Mootopia, and unconsciously, I started including everything I wrote about in my book. And one of them was aromatherapy. Now, if any of you are on Instagram, aromatherapy is going to tell you that it cures cancer. It does not. It can replace psychotropic drugs. It cannot. But let me tell you what I did with aromatherapy. Every day in the hospital, I took a $1 bottle and I put in a different smell. And I would spray the room with rose or lavender or sandalwood. And every day the nurses would come in and go, Sara-Chana, what's that smell today? And the doctors would come in and go, wow, this is the best smelling room in the hospital. And the next thing I knew, the nurses would come in and say, do you mind if we eat lunch in your room? It just smells so great here. And what happened was my daughter got better care. I'm telling you, she got better care because rather than being a room of doom and gloom, which it was in my heart, I had flowers every day in there. I broke every rule in the book. I had big posters up of beautiful scenery. I moved her bed, I wasn't allowed to, in a place where she could see the sun rise and the sun go down. And I sprayed my essential oils. And I want to tell you, I shifted the environment. Breathing things in are such an important part of our Jewish culture. During Havdalah, you breathe in besamim or spices because they say we get an extra soul on Shabbos. And when the soul leaves, it's hard for the soul to depart. So you give it a beautiful scent to help it depart. So if you want to include aromatherapy into your life, you don't need to spend a lot of money. You can buy a $5 oil, buy a $1 spray bottle, and you can just put a couple drops on your pillow. I want to tell you, despite everything that the doctors said, they said my daughter was going to be a quadriplegic for the rest of her life. And we got her acupuncture and craniosacral and PT and OT. And my daughter's now walking with a cane, and she doesn't need a wheelchair or a walker. So she still needs a refuah shalema deporia bracha bas Sara-Chana. But let's move on with aromatherapy. So next slide, and we're almost done. You can use it. You can buy a diffuser, and you can have a diffuser on a timer. And if you have trouble waking up in the morning, next slide, you can actually have an uplifting scent like orange or lime or grapefruit, literally on a timer. So when you wake up in the morning, your room can smell like a citrus explosion. And if you have trouble sleeping at night, you could burn or put it in a diffuser, or what I do, because I'm a little lazy, I just put a couple drops on my pillowcase of oils that are soothing and calming, like lavender or sandalwood. And you just need to find a scent that you like and that can shift you, either to wake you up or help you go to sleep or get you in a better mood. So they also come in pre-made sprays. Next slide. These are oils that stimulate orange, lime, lemon, tangerine, grapefruit. They give you a lift. Next slide. Oils that calm are lavender, rose, vetiver, and ylang-ylang. Next slide. Oils to help with your memory because you need more blood flow into your brain if you're having a little issues with memory. Rosemary, you can just put a couple drops on a tissue, inhale it, and clinical studies show that it increases blood flow. You could also use peppermint, sage, or cypress. Sage is antiviral, and I actually burnt that all over my house during COVID-19. Next slide. Oils that are stimulating and attractive and make you feel better is bergamot, ylang-ylang, sandalwood, neroli, rose, jasmine, patchouli. One drop in a little bit of lotion on your wrist, and you can feel better. Next oil. Next slide. So I want to conclude with when you fall in love with herbs, they love you back. When you take an herb, it helps reduce inflammation in your knees. It helps repair your stomach. It helps with your memory. Herbs are like food. I just want to say this before we end. Garlic and onion are considered herbs. And people say to me, how do you know if you're going to take too many herbs? And all the herbs I spoke with, you're not going to take too many of it. Think about this. You make a pot of chicken soup, you put 5 onions in it. You're not going to the next day say, you know what? I ate so many onions in my chicken soup. Today I'm not putting any onions in my meat. It's not true. You can use parsley. You can use cilantro. You can use onions. You can use garlic. These are all herbs. Next slide. So I want to thank you for joining me, and thank you for the all times. And Bryan, if any of you would like to be in touch with me, you can be in touch with me through my website, which is Sara-Chana.com. You can email me. If you're interested, you can purchase my book, which I talk all about the history of herbs, the use of herbs, and it's something that's really easy to read. And I want to open it up for questions, and I want to thank you all for joining me this evening.
Thank you so much. That was very interesting, and thanks for sharing your personal stories in that as well. And we are getting some questions. Great. And if you want to submit a question, you can use the chat function below. Interrupt me, or it'll get to me. I have a question for you to kind of kick things off. We don't have that much time, but we'll try to get to as many as we can. Tell me a bit more about your experience with COVID. We have very low numbers here, so not as many people know people who have had it in Manitoba, but tell us a bit about your experience and how herbs, what you took and how that helped in your recovery, maybe how you also mix that with traditional medicines.
Sure. So again, as I said in the beginning, don't work if you get it the first 2 weeks. That was my downfall. I felt I was like Superwoman, you know what I mean? Like, oh, I can get over this. I do think it's important to slow down and get into bed. I think smoothies and soups were very important because I did not have a hearty appetite at all. Eating food was a little nauseating. So having a smoothie a day gave me energy. And I think the three most important herbs were echinacea, which we discussed to stimulate the immune system, cleavers, which was a lymphatic drainer, and OSHA, which opened up my lungs. I did deal with people that were in their 70s that had COVID-19. I did not need any Western medicine. At the time that I had it, there were not even tests for COVID-19. There weren't even medications for it. You either stayed home and suffered or went to the hospital and got on a ventilator. So thank God all my clients of all ages really felt when they took herbs that it opened up their lungs and they were able to function. And they did. And I've seen hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of cases.
So how do you incorporate it? I mean, is this something that you should be taking all the time sort of to prevent getting colds or COVIDs, or do you take it first?
So what I would suggest is everybody get an immune mix. I had a slide up there. There are 3 companies which Rabbi and Rebbitzin can email out to everybody later. Wish Garden, Herb Farm, and Herbalist and Alchemist, and they make their own immune mix. And personally, I would take a shot glass, fill this up, it only fills up halfway, put in 2 shots of the herb, and I would take it once a day for the next 3 months. And then if you start to feel sick, you can increase it to 3 times a day. And then when you feel better, decrease it to once a day. So I do believe, and again, people that are taking many medications, it's important to be in touch with herbalists. Maybe you have an herbalist in your area. I do Skype and Zoom people all over the world, especially since COVID-19. This is not a sales pitch on me. I'm just sharing with you, if you're taking medications, it is important to discuss it. But even if you just took lemon balm and elderberry, those are herbs that are not contraindicated with medications.
What just, you know, you go see a doctor if you're feeling sick. So when should you go see an herbalist? How do you, is that something that's going? When do you make that phone call?
So usually what happens is clients will come into me. It's even better if they're not feeling unwell, but usually that's when people come to me. But you come in and your herbalist will take a very in-depth history. The foods you eat, how often you go to the bathroom, are you a hot person or a cold person? What medications are you taking, what supplements? One of the things I do mostly is I look at everybody's supplements and I go, waste of money, waste of money, waste of money, this one's good. So a lot of people are taking supplements, you know, because they heard an ad on the radio or their friends taking it. It's always better to have a relationship with an herbalist, and you always go to your doctor and get a diagnosis. Real herbalists are not against doctors at all. We want to integrate and work with them. So usually when I have a client, I know their history, I have a chart on them. So they'll say, oh, Sara-Chana, my sinus infection is coming back. And I'm going to say, oh, remember in the closet, you've got that sinus herb mix. They're like, oh gosh, I forgot to take it. So really best to meet up with an herbalist before, but you can always do it even when you're at a point where you're not feeling well.
A question from the audience: do herbs need kosher symbols?
So really the herbs that I mentioned, 1 out of the 3 have a kosher symbol, but all the herbs in US and Canada use the same grain alcohol and the same glycerite that has a kosher sign on it. So we really don't have non-kosher items in tinctures or dried flowers, barks, or seeds. When you're getting into supplements, you got some issues because they use a lot of glycerin, they use a lot of non-kosher products, but not pure herbalists don't do that.
Another question that was sent. So the person who asked the question works with alcoholics. Can they safely take tinctures if they are made with alcohol?
Great question. So a lot of my alcoholics or post-alcoholics or recovered alcoholics will say, Sara-Chana, I don't want alcohol. So then if they're up for it, we can do it in tea form, or I special order herbs in a glycerite, which is a sugar base. But others of my alcoholics find that it doesn't affect them at all, and it does not give them any desire to go out and get a drink. So I think each person would be individual. And I have a lot of post-alcoholics that are fine with tinctures. Each case will be individual. Great question.
Another question was, what do you recommend for severe osteoarthritis in a 9-year-old woman in chronic pain?
That's a hard one. So by the company Herbalist and Alchemist, they do have a combination called osteo herbs. And osteo herbs have herbs like oats in it, and it has metals in it. And those are herbs that can really feed the bones. Bones are alive and living, and they need to be fed. And there are a lot of herbs that actually go in and feed the bones.
Great. Another question is mixing herbs with other medications such as antidepressants or meds for anxiety. You may have touched on that just a moment ago, but
Yes.
I want to specifically ask that, what should people do there?
So if you're on psychotropic drugs, I would suggest working with an herbalist. A lot of my clients that are on psychotropic drugs do feel that they're stable on the meds, but they're not exactly where they want to be. And when we add an herb, because I know which herbs can be integrated, they say, okay, I'm much more stable. So you never want to go off of psychotropic drugs. You need to speak to your MD and your herbalist. But that's a question where we really have to, like that orchestra, we have to make that jazz band pop.
we just have a couple more minutes. So if there's any more questions that anyone wants to ask, please send it through the chat. Another question was about what herbs can people take for tinnitus, which you did mention that earlier, tinnitus.
Yes.
What can you take to help with that?
Tinnitus is a really rough one. And I would use homeopathic remedies, which we did not have time. Next time we'll get into them more. But actually, if you take the homeopathic remedy of aspirin, which is salicylic acid, it can actually help reduce the symptoms of tinnitus. So it's called like cures like. When the Jews were complaining to Moses that the water was bitter, Moses took a bitter stick, put it in the bitter water, and the water became sweet. Like really, if you were at my house and you said my cup of coffee was bitter, I'd be putting sugar and milk in it. So it's called like cures like. So when you take the homeopathic remedy of salicylic acid, it can help reduce that tinnitus.
Somebody asked, which oils do you use as a base?
So you can use, but now look, I do things on the fly because I'm that type A personality, always on the run, doing 55 things at the same time. So I usually just take this and put it on my wrist and go, in love, and I'm on to my next project, or put it on my pillowcase. But jojoba oil is a very famous oil. I also like almond oil. Any kind of oil that's got a nice fat content to it, or you could be a little lazy and get some Jergens hand lotion and just use that.
Great. And there was another question. I guess you had talked about there are lots of these the herbs you can just find, out and about. So how do you dry those herbs so that you can use them?
So it's really great that, well, it's good and bad the generation we live in, right? Like there's good and there's bad to it. That's a whole nother discussion. But you can go on YouTube and you can say how to dry an herb, and there's going to be a 2-minute video on it. So obviously, you don't want to work with poisonous plants, and I don't use any poisonous plants in my office, of course. But there's herbs like plantain, which grow just everywhere. And if you look at edible plants in your area, they will give you exact pictures, so you can go out there with your phone, look down at the ground, look at your phone, and figure it out. So that's something we can all learn on YouTube, or we can have a class on it one day.
I have a question about the superfoods.
Yeah.
That was a nice long list there. I like a lot of those. What does the superfood do? And how is this the stuff you should incorporate into your diet?
So my understanding of a superfood is when you can take a little bit of it and get a lot of nutrients, right? So like, I like to eat like 5 pieces of bread because it's delicious, but I'm only getting a small amount of nutrients, right? But if I have like 3 goji berries and I have some oatmeal, I'm getting tons of nutrients. So a superfood is a food that acts medicinally in your body with a very small amount of it. So even a little maple syrup, which has calcium, which is actually even easier to break down than your calcium pill, That's what I think of as a superfood. You need only a little bit of it, you know? So those people that are running around, I don't have time to cook, I don't have time to do anything. I tell them to just make a drink with blackstrap molasses, a little almond milk, a little honey, and you're on your way, and you've got more iron than you're going to even almost get in a steak. So that's a superfood to me.
Just a couple last questions. One from me and then one from somebody else. I'm also, you know, there's lots of, you can get a lot of different illnesses from a cold to lots of different things.
Yes.
And you did mention sort of taking some of this stuff ongoing, but how do you know then, you know, what to take when you get a cold versus the flu versus maybe more severe illness? I guess they can talk to you, but is there something that they can do to help themselves to understand better as to kind of what to take when they're not feeling well?
So if you get an herb combination that's been designed by a master herbalist, a tincture, you're pretty much good to go with any cold, flu, sore throat, ear infection. You'll increase the dose, and you can even quadruple the dose. It's so funny. I was learning from a Native American MD, and she said, you know, when a person's sick, they take their bottle and they do 5 little drops of echinacea. She goes, when I was sick, my mother would take out a tablespoon, stuff it with a tablespoon of echinacea. And all of our bubbies used to give us cod liver oil. Like, remember, cod liver oil was a thing because it's got lots of vitamins and nutrients in it. So if you get one good immune mix, you can take a little bit every day to stimulate that immune system. And then you're having an off day, you can take it twice a day. And you're having a real off day, you can take it 4 times a day. But if you have any medical conditions like diabetes, high blood pressure, arthritis, you really want to work with an herbalist that will mix immune herbs with anti-inflammatory, immune herbs with lowering cholesterol. So that gets a little more specific.
Great. And maybe the last question, we're just past 9. How do you feel today? Are you fully recovered from COVID? How are you doing?
Yes, thank God I'm fully recovered. It did take me a month. My first symptoms were March 12th. By the beginning of April, I was really pretty much good to go. So it's been April to May, May to June, June to July. You know, like it's over 3 months that my community is past it and I'm past it. It was interesting though, because I felt very draggy and I felt like I wasn't back to myself for those 4 weeks. And then one day when I was walking down the street, I was like, oh, I'm back to myself. I do feel that I still have a little bit of a cough. There is a little bit of cough. We are worried about a little scar tissue in the lungs. So one of the most important things I forgot to mention is that we all need to practice breathing. And I'm always so nervous and running around crazy that it's like, oh yeah, I have to take a deep breath. But really, if you do get COVID, you want to be able to use your entire lungs. So everybody here for free can practice taking a very deep breath, holding it and exhaling it slowly. 3 breaths like that a day is remarkable. 10 would be beyond. And when you go outside, it is important to take a deep breath, expand those lungs as much as you can, because you want to make sure that your lungs really can expand and then they can shrink back. So deep breathing is something that I think is hugely important. Random acts of kindness, deep breathing, no money, great things.
That's great. I already feel relaxed now after that session there. Thank you so much for doing this. This was great. I want to thank the Jewish Learning Institute and Shmuley and Adina for putting this on and for everyone for joining. And thank you, Sara-Chana. And before I go, I know Shmuley wants to say a few words, so I'm going to pass it off to him to finish things off.
Yeah, hi everyone. Thank you for coming. I just wanted to thank Sara-Chana. What a fascinating presentation. Truly, I'm still trying to absorb and
if you can get him to try an herb, Sara-Chana, then this whole thing was worth it. I'm amazed that he was interested in bringing you here. So you have a real skeptic. Hopefully we pushed the limit a little bit here.
Look, it's Hashem's medicine, by the way. It's God's medicine. I mean, it grows everywhere. When I do live presentations, I will literally go around the Chabad house and pick like 5 medicinal plants, and the rabbi or rebbetzin are like, oh my God, I never noticed it. So really, Shmuley, it's your gift. It's here for you.
That's amazing. Like we could walk through the forest and you could just pick plants.
Be careful.
Unbelievable.
At first, I'd go with someone that knows what they're doing, Shmuley. But can I just say one amazing story since you brought this up? I know we have to go, but I want to blow your mind. My husband was a mashgiach, a rabbi on the Boy Scout camp of America. And once a year, they have all these Jewish Boy Scouts that come. And this man stood up, older man, and he said to the crowd, he said, I was raised in Germany, and my father made me go to Boy Scouts. He said, I hated it. I didn't want to learn how to make a fire. I didn't want to learn how to clean water. I was bored out of my mind. My father made me go. I didn't want to learn about plants. He said, and when the Nazis came in, he ran into the woods. This is a true story. And he almost made it through the woods, and he turned around and saw all these Jewish people in the woods. I have chills. And he saw that they had no idea what to do. And he stayed in the woods for over a year teaching people what plants were poisonous, what plants they could eat, how to filter water, how to stay alive while trekking through the forest to their safety. So knowing about edible plants, knowing about survival is really important. And this man saved thousands of lives, thousands, from his couple months in the Boy Scouts. So knowing about edible plants is really important, and they're here for us.
Wow. What an inspiring story.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for coming on, and thank you, Bryan, for hosting, and thanks everyone for participating. And we do this once every 2 weeks over the summer. So there's a lot of interesting topics and different presenters. So I encourage you to please come on, not next Tuesday, but in 2 weeks, Tuesday, 8 p.m. Thank you for joining, and we'll see you again. And stay safe, everyone.
Thank you.
Everybody.
All right. End the meeting.
Thank you, and thank you, Sara-Chana. That was great. Nice to see you all. Hi, Morris. Hi, Maura.